Interested in learning about wine, but not sure where to start? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Cork and Fizz Guide to Wine podcast. I'm your host, Haley Bowman, and I'm so glad you're here. I'm a wine enthusiast turned wine educator and founder of the Seattle-based wine tasting business, Cork and Fizz. It is my goal to build your confidence in wine by making it approachable and lots of fun. You can expect to learn everything from how to describe your favorite wine to what to pair with dinner tonight, and so much more. Whether you're a casual wine sipper or a total cork dork like myself, this podcast is for you. So grab yourself a glass and let's dive in. Hello and welcome back to the Cork and Fizz Guide to Wine podcast. Today we will be continuing the France and French wine mini-series, and we're going to be talking to a father and daughter team behind a winery in Burgundy. So during my time in Burgundy, I was able to book 2 tours, and I'm going to talk more about this. I'll have a full episode dedicated to my trip there, but I want to tell you about this tour because the first one was with this wonderful woman named Kim, who we are also going to get to talk to on a future episode, but she took us to 3 amazing wineries. One of those wineries was Maison Shaps, and we drove up to what looked like this cute little house in Marseille. We walked into a small building off to the left of the house and were greeted by the lovely Hanna Shaps. Hanna is the winery manager and is French-American. Her mother's French and her father's American. We soon learned that Maison Shaps was founded by her father, Michael Shaps, after his studies in Beaune, and that he also owns a winery in Virginia and is considered one of the key figures in the modern Virginia wine industry. I knew immediately they would be perfect to have on the podcast, and I was so excited when they accepted my invitation. So in part 1 of this interview, you'll learn how Michael started the winery in Burgundy and what it's like being an American business owner in France. We'll also discuss how the world of wine and winemaking differs between Virginia and Burgundy and how they're similar. Then be sure to stay tuned for next week's episode where we dive deeper into the world of Burgundy wine from the perspective of a winemaker and winery manager. So without further ado, let's get into the interview. Well, yeah, let's just dive in. Can you tell me a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm Hanna Shaps. I'm French American, and I'm currently the manager of Maison Shaps in Burgundy, France. I grew up in Charlottesville, Virginia, around wine, with a French mother and an American winemaker father. And 5.5 years ago, I made the move to Burgundy, where I first was working in cheese. And then now for the last 3 years, I've been running the family business and handle the day-to-day and work with my father very closely to make sure that, the wine quality is what we want and that we're growing our business and finding new pathways to sell our wine.
And I'm Michael Shaps, Hannah's father, and I started in the wine business started studying in 1990 and came to Burgundy after running a restaurant and a wine program in Boston out of college, and fell in love with Burgundy back then, and still was young enough to throw everything to the wind and see what happens, and headed to Burgundy and was able to talk my way into the Lycée Viticole de Beaune in 1990 and stayed for 2 years, 2 vinifications, and worked in Pouligny Marché for what was Maison Chardonnay Trebuchet, and worked for them, and then went back to the States and kind of heard about Virginia and had done research of wineries all around the U.S. where I wanted to be, but I really thought Virginia had a lot of upside potential. And when I arrived in Virginia, there were only 43 wineries. Now there's over 300. So, I think the bet paid off. Everyone thought I was crazy to go to France. They also thought I was crazy to go to Virginia. So it all kind of came together through a lot of hard work, but glad to be a part of the Virginia industry over these past 30 years. And so in 2004, I went back to Burgundy and met up with my former boss. And he told me that the winery, Chardonnay Trebuchet, had been sold off, broken up, and he was looking for something to do. And so I suggested we get together and start a winery together. And he called me a few months later, said he found a kind of vacant house and winery in Meursault, and we partnered up and bought the property, renovated it for a year. And 2005 was our first vintage in Meursault. And we started out purely as a negociant. And then over time, he decided to move on and do other things. And I bought him out and renamed it. It was Maison Shaps and Ruche before. And in 2011, we did the transaction. In 2012, we started vinifying on just Maison Shaps, and then eventually started buying property, and now have 4 hectares that we own, as well as doing some negociant wines. And so in the meantime, in Virginia, I started my own brand in 2000, making my own wines, and started doing some consulting in Virginia. And then in 2007, opened my own facility, which is the Michael Shaps Winery, but it's also known as Michael Shaps Wine Works, who we do a custom crush operation as well. So we have about 15 clients in Virginia that we make wine for, besides my own label. And so we're located in Charlottesville. So I go back and forth between Burgundy and Hanna keeps an eye on and runs the operation in Burgundy when I'm not here. And yeah, there you go.
Yeah, we're both in Paris right now because we're promoting Virginia tourism to French travel agencies and bloggers. So we were invited by Virginia Travel and Tourism and Agriculture to present what Virginia is like and the wines and the tourism of the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Oh, wow. That's cool. Okay. How is that being, this is totally off the plan, but like, how is that being responded to? Or like, is the world of Paris interested in Virginia wine?
Yeah, well, we've actually been selling the Virginia wine here for over a year. Hannah's been selling it out of Meursault, but we were at VinExpo last year in Paris, and the feedback was fantastic. And we've had some interest. Nothing. It's not going to,
take over the world.
Yeah, but it's been more novelty, but it's fun to have the French and other buyers from other countries taste our wines and really have been quite impressed with the quality coming out of Virginia that they never knew about. So it's been an eye opener, and it's always fun. They don't know what to expect, and then we always get this great feedback. It's fun.
And I think the wine is a great way to reach the French. I think, the whole theme is travel and tourism and coming to Virginia, but I think that French people understand and know wine. So if you kind of present that foot forward, it kind of opens the door to, oh, this is good. Oh, maybe like Virginia could be, the food could be good, and we have a great chef with us. And so we're just trying to show them that it is a different place, but that we also have really high quality products and, welcoming people. And we're trying to put our best foot forward. So it was good. We had an event last night and an event tonight as well.
Cool. Very fun. Yeah. Just a quick reminder, if you are not on my mailing list yet, what are you waiting for? I would love for you to join. When you do, you'll get a free shopping guide that has 15 of my favorite wines under $15. Head to corkandfizz.com, scroll down to the bottom, and there'll be a little section where you can join the mailing list. I send out a weekly newsletter filled with wine tips, recommendations, special offers, and so much more. Now, let's get back to the show. I'll have to get back. I do want to talk about, I think it's cool that you have like a foot in France and a foot in Virginia and making wine there. And you kind of have a very special view on that. But I want to go back to, you said a couple things that I think might be new to some people listening to the podcast. And so wanted you to be able to discuss them a little bit. First, you said the winery in France started as a negociant. Can you tell us what that means?
My favorite way to describe what a negociant is in Burgundy is to say simply someone who doesn't own land. So a negociant has access to the grapes themselves. They have access to the fresh pressed grape juice. They have access to bulk fermented finished wine or even bottled wine, but they really don't own any land in Burgundy. And owning land in Burgundy is super difficult, challenging, and requires a lot of kind of connections, networking, and being well placed at the right time and having the right people think of you, especially as a foreigner. So often people begin as négociant because it still allows you to make quality Burgundy wine without going through the long and often very costly process of acquiring vineyards in the region.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I feel like that word, I heard that word a lot. That's a very common word in France when talking about the wine world, just not as, heard of here in the US. And then on the Virginia side, you mentioned your custom crush facility, and you kind of hinted at what that was, but can you explain that as well?
Sure. We make wine for a lot of independent growers who want to start their own brand, their own production, and don't want to, invest in all the capital that takes the equipment to build a winery or the knowledge. It's easier to come to us with their grapes and have us help them turn into wine than them to go through the whole process of buying equipment, hiring a winemaker. So we make the wine for them and with their input, and then they take the wine back and sell it. So they do the two hardest things, which is growing good grapes and selling wine. The rest is easy. We do that part.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay. All right. So going back to being a winemaker in France, especially as an American, I'm so curious about this because I feel like the French are so protective of their country and, getting into this world. So you kind of talked a little bit about how you got into winemaking in Burgundy, but can you share a little bit more? And do you ever find it difficult to be an American business owner, an American winemaker in France?
Well, the last part is easy. It's difficult to be a business owner whether you're in America or France. So the challenges are the same no matter what country. But in France, there's definitely a lot more regulation. And having been a part of the French winemaking scene for 40 years, I kind of have learned what the do's and don'ts and all the paperwork that goes with it. So over time, it's still a lot of work, extra work we don't have in the US. So it definitely is challenging in the amount of extra steps you have to do and regulations, but it's not impossible to overcome as long as you have a good team in place. So
Team.
a good daughter in place. No, anyways. But in terms of the appreciation, the Burgundians have been great. When I first came to Burgundy, almost 40 years ago, there weren't many Americans. I definitely wasn't the first by any means, but there was not nearly as many as there are now. And so I was able to meet a lot of people, a lot of, the curiosity factor, the American people were really interested and, have long relationships with people in Burgundy over the years. And so it's been, easy for me. I know there's a lot more and more international and Americans in Burgundy. And so I think the French are starting to, maybe had enough of the international investment in Burgundy. They're very proud, but but again, it's overall, I think it's been a positive thing, but I could see definitely there's been a lot of Americans that have come through Burgundy and have departed with their, tail between their legs and weren't able to make it and did not represent the Americans too well. But there's also some really great ones too. So it's like anywhere,
Yeah.
good and bad.
Absolutely. And it sounds like a lot of it had to do with like connections for you. You met somebody in Burgundy and or you were able to start working at a winery. And then that same boss that you worked for there was the one that was like, hey, this happened. I want to create something, you want to do it with me. Let's do this. And so that seemed like a good way to kind of get your foot in the door, so to say.
Exactly. Yeah. It's all about connections. That's it.
Yeah.
And I think it's over in managing the business. My goal was also to put my French foot forward. So really try to, show that I understand like the history, the culture and the reputation and really try to go out of my way and really ask questions and show that I'm interested in other people's ways of doing things and, that I'm there, especially with our neighbors and really trying to say, hey, we're here, we're open, we're friendly, we're ready and do that all in French and really try to present myself as like the face of the business and try to show a good kind of front to the business.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good tie-in to the next question I was going to ask you. You mentioned a little bit in the beginning, but Hanna, what is it like managing a winery? I think a lot of people automatically think like with business roles in the winery, obviously there's a winemaker, but managing it is a lot of work. And then also creating a tasting program. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I actually kind of came into the winery backwards. So I really came in with the idea that I came to France with the idea I was going to work in cheese. And so I worked in cheese for 2 years, decided to leave to start my own personal cheese project, but really didn't know how to do that. So part-time, I wanted to find something to fill my time. And I moved to Burgundy because that's where we had the home base. And so when I was deciding how to fill the other half of my time, I thought about our empty space in Meursault. I thought about the fact that when I was working in the cheese industry in Beaune and a tourist spot, many people would ask me where to come taste wine and they wanted like a small family experience. And I really didn't know who to send them to because all I knew were the big chateaus, the big kind of large negociants or cooperatives. And I wasn't able to really give them great suggestions, although obviously now there's more and more and there were still at the time, but I didn't know of them. And so it really came to mind to try to do something myself. I'd grown up in the tasting rooms in Virginia and helped out. And so I decided part-time to do cheese and wine pairings and wine tastings with our empty facility in Merceau. And that really took off. And so it just grew very organically. I mean, it took off and you start, realizing you need to have inventory. So you start looking for shelving. And then over time, it really evolves. And so that was in 2021. And now we're in 2024. And we've had 3 really good seasons. And each year we're trying to evolve. So this year we released some higher price point wines to really have a higher end tasting experience as well. We're working on for next year, maybe some collaborations with maybe eventually private chefs and doing like wine dinners and trying to really grow that business that way. And I'm really trying to find someone, or I have someone actually, but really trying to put someone in place to really develop that part of the business more than I even can do, because now I've turned back to the regular business development and trying to grow our export sales, trying to grow our distribution, and all of that has been new for me. But I have an economics degree and I really like numbers, and as long as I have ideas, I feel like we can keep going forward. And so it's been a different year this year, different projects and plans, but we're still working hard to make them come to fruition.
Yeah, gosh, so many different things to worry about. It's like, yeah, create the tasting program so when people in Burgundy, they have something to taste. You can introduce your wines there, but then it's also like, yeah, get the wines outside of the country, try to reach that wider community. Do you find that from what I understood when I was in Burgundy, that like tastings are not super common in the sense that like a lot of wineries don't need to do tastings to sell their wines. And at that point, just think they don't need to do tastings at all. They don't realize there's this like tourist market coming in that do that. Do you agree with that? Or do you find more wineries are starting to open up their doors to doing these tastings and experiences? This podcast is sponsored by Repour Wine Savers. Listen, I love wine, but that doesn't mean I want to drink a full bottle every night. You see, it's always a risk opening a bottle knowing I'll only have a glass or two. But now I don't worry about that at all because I have Repour. These little contraptions will keep your open bottles of wine good for up to 3 months by removing oxygen from the bottle using fancy chemistry. And they're so easy to use. I simply open a bottle of wine, cork or screw cap, just like normal, and enjoy my glass or two. Then, when I'm ready to call it a night, I rip the foil off my Repour wine saver and place it in the bottle in place of the cork or screw cap, and then stick the bottle in the fridge. Simple as that. Then, whenever I grab another glass from that bottle in the future, I just make sure to put the Repour back on as soon as I'm done pouring. It's that easy. Want to give Repour a try? Head to repour.com, REPOUR.com, and use code CORKANDFIZZ for 10% off your order. That's Repour, REPOUR.com, and use code CORKANDFIZZ. No spaces in that, and the and is spelled out. So it's CORKANDFIZZ. Once you have Repour, you'll never have to worry about opening a bottle of wine just for one glass. I mean, heck, now you can try 2 or more wines at the same time and have your own at-home wine tasting. This podcast is sponsored by the Cork Crew Virtual Wine Club. Interested in trying new wines, but not sure where to start? Or maybe you've been listening to this podcast for a while and you love the idea of tasting wine live with me. If that's you, come join my Cork Crew Virtual Wine Club, and you'll get to sip wine with me twice a month while I help you find new favorite wines. The Cork Crew is not your ordinary wine club. This is a community of people who are passionate about exploring new flavors, learning about different wine styles, and having fun along the way. And the best part about this club, purchasing the wine is completely optional. Plus, all events are recorded, and you have access to the full library of recordings as a Cork Crew member, so you can always catch up if you can't make it live. Oh, and did I mention it's virtual, which means you get to do all of this from the comfort of your sofa in your PJs. No need to worry about driving in crappy traffic, finding a designated driver, or spending an arm and a leg on a taxi. Want to give it a try without the commitment? You're in luck. Right now, I'm offering a free class pass to anybody who wants to try out the Cork Crew Virtual Wine Tasting Club. With this pass, you'll be able to join a Cork Crew event of your choosing. No strings attached. I don't need your credit card. I don't need you to sign up for anything. You'll be my guest. Simply head to corkandfizz.com/free class pass to get your class pass and be one step closer to becoming a member of the best wine tasting club around, the Cork Crew. I can't wait to see you there. Now let's get back to the show.
I think personally more and more are. I think you're still going to have the top maybe 10%, 15% of the historic producers of Burgundy who really don't make that much wine, or they make wine that's all allocated, and they really don't have the necessity or the inventory to welcome the general public. They focus on welcoming their existing clients, journalists, sommeliers, etc. And then you have this growing kind of demographic of new producers, or younger producers that understand the value of tourism and that maybe are seeing other markets decrease in sales and then are starting to understand that welcoming guests is also, even though it's more timely, it's a really rewarding way to sell wine. But, it comes with, of course, its own, time constraints and then logistics of scheduling and staffing. But I think overall I see more and more places offering visits and being more available, whereas it used to be maybe you just kind of show up and if they're there, they welcome you. Now I see more like for reservations, click here or email here, whereas I know when you started, it was just kind of you could walk around and knock on, if it was open, people would give you a taste, and now it's not so much like that.
Yeah, definitely.
No, it's changed. It's changed across Europe, not just in Burgundy, where, the traditional, you can knock on a door or call and people would welcome you. But, since the Burgundy's got skyrocketed and the well-known domains don't need to do that anymore, that's one side of it. But the other side of it, there's a lot of other domains and people who aren't the highly allocated ones that realize that they need to do more tourism, agritourism type activities. And so a lot of the young starting out domains or people in lesser appellations are all of a sudden becoming creative, doing more US type tourism marketing and events. Back in the early days, that didn't exist at all. Now, art shows or a chef pairing or things like that, these wineries that don't have big export markets are all of a sudden realizing they need to be a little more proactive if they're going to survive.
And I think there's also been a growth of tourism operators, and I think they're also challenged to find like domains that are not represented, off the beaten track wineries and producers, which I think, the tour you chose to do, and I think that's what Kim specializes in. And there are many other guides that, try to have their own, special hookups. And so I think there's a lot of networking and kind of coaxing on behalf of the tourism professionals to really access maybe people they've met or wines they've tasted that they think are a good representation of Burgundy. And they also push on their end, hey, can we come? I know you're busy. I know it's a hard time, but I would really love, if you could welcome us. I have these great clients. And so you're like, okay. And then you do it once, you do it twice, and then you kind of become their partner. And they're like, okay, next week, 6 people, week after, 4 people, and you just roll with it.
Yeah. We're actually interviewing Kim later on the podcast, so I think that'll be a lot of fun to hear her side of things on the tourism side and how she got these amazing wineries. That was such an amazing tour, getting to taste at these smaller but really amazing wineries. Okay, so now the question I'm honestly really excited to ask is, with you guys being like winemakers and managing wineries in both Virginia and France, which I think for a lot of people, and specifically in Burgundy and France, I think a lot of people would be like, those are 2 very different regions. But I'm curious, do you notice any similarities on beyond just like, of course, we take grapes and we make wine. Do you notice any similarities between the regions? And then what are kind of those major differences that you notice either in the winemaking world or just in the wine world in general surrounding the 2 regions?
So the first similarity is that you chose 2 regions that have harvest at the same time.
Yeah, that was a smart,
Number 1.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking. I went with the passion, not the common sense, the pragmatic side.
Yeah. I guess when you think about it, a lot of traveling winemakers tend to do northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere, so they travel between the 2.
It's been a challenge, but no, for me, there's definitely climatic differences, but not extreme differences. I mean, the growing seasons are almost identical in Virginia and Burgundy. What's really different is the soils and the some of the moisture and humidity and climate, the heat. There's more extremes in Virginia, whether it's more extreme heat or more extreme cold, more rain. So there's more challenges from that side in Virginia, but all in all, the growing season is very similar. But we don't have the same varieties, and I do make Chardonnay in Virginia, I found some sites that have some lighter soils and less clay and cooler sites up in the mountains. So those are crucial for making good Chardonnay, but or we're more, hotter climate overall. And so we're producing more, what does well for us are more varietals from Southwest France, South of France, Bordeaux. So that's not what I was trained to make. But now, been making these varietals for 30 years in Virginia. It's exciting to be able to work with so many different varieties. And when I'm in Burgundy, it's great to be focused on Pinot, Gote, Chard, and more philosophy. Winemaking philosophy is what's important. The varietals you learn and adapt and figure out what's best for what varietal.
Can you speak also to, or I can speak to the fact that you're a really new world, old world. So you have a newer wine region where there's, as we mentioned before, not as many rules and not as many, let's say, like name protections. Like the AOSC system doesn't exist in the US. You have American viticultural areas, you have AVAs, but you don't have really the idea that to make a Pommard, you have to have a lot of conditions met. It's, tested, it's declared, you really have to make sure that there's
yield
restrictions, alcohol levels, just there's a ton of rules in Burgundy to follow to make sure that what you're making is a correct Burgundy wine. And I think that's really, for me, what strikes me as maybe the biggest contrast is that you have maybe more creative control and flexibility in the New World or in Virginia. And in Burgundy, you're really trying to show your version of what you're supposed to do with what you have.
Fair. Do you notice a difference at all between like consumers in Virginia versus like in Burgundy?
I think the average consumer who comes to me in Burgundy is a bit more knowledgeable than but I think, the last time I worked in the US was like 6 years ago. So I would say that people were knowledgeable maybe about wine in general, but coming to Burgundy, especially as an American, maybe you have to have a bit more passion and for wine, but not necessarily, but often people, if they're making the big trip, especially internationals, they do a bit of research before, whereas maybe in Virginia, it was more like leisure or kind of social experiences where you would come meet friends at a winery and do a tasting, whereas Burgundy is like, obviously, making appointments is not easy. So you have to try to get in somewhere. And at that point, you usually know a bit about what you're trying to taste, but not everybody. I think that would be. And then I think, I don't know, I haven't been in the tasting program in Virginia.
No, there's definitely a difference in clientele, but it's a different scale. It's a very different scale. We're in Virginia, a pretty large, highly trafficked tasting room open to the public, and you get all kinds of people. In Burgundy, people are coming, whether it's from Europe or the U.S. specifically because they know Burgundy, they appreciate the wines. They decide to go to Burgundy instead of wherever in the Rhone or Loire because they want Burgundy wine, so they're a little more knowledgeable and pretty much what Hanna said. So that's the main difference.
I would also say that in Virginia, we're very fortunate to have a really dynamic and large regular customer base as in the form of wine club. And so I think a lot of repeat visitors are from our wine club at the tasting room, and they are really knowledgeable on our story. They're knowledgeable on our wines. They're always looking for new vintages or new releases, and they really know what they're getting, and they're going because they want an experience they know and are comfortable with. And versus in Burgundy, we get a lot of one and done. So people who come through and then I'll never hear or see from them again. And in Virginia, it's a lot of repetition and really like loyal, great visitors.
So loyal that a lot of them come to Burgundy. And our wine club members get a discount at staying at the house, and Hanna, does a tasting for them. So it's been very popular with our Virginia wine club because we do sell the Burgundian wines in our tasting room in Virginia. So they're already familiar with them before they come to Burgundy.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. Yeah. Now that I'm thinking about it, is like, because wine clubs are super common in the US. Like every winery has a wine club. And that's kind of what you like, from what I understand, that's what you rely on. That's kind of like that's your starting customer base. And like, how much, at least you're going to sell this much amount of wine. And so there, a lot of wineries try to build that wine club. I don't remember, like, that doesn't seem to be a thing in France or in Burgundy, but maybe more on the side of like allocations or kind of how they do that rather than a wine club.
Yeah, I only know one or two larger domains who have an active wine club. But again, I think the majority of people's wineries business models in Burgundy is direct to retail or to distribution. I don't know if it's a lot direct to consumer because they can, sell pallets at a time, and it's a much easier, more fluid system. So I'm not sure that allocating, 3 bottles, packing them up and having a big club is really part of what they have the staffing or the time to do. And I think that maybe it's obviously an older, more renowned wine region, and so they didn't have to build growth that way. Whereas in New World, it's a different business model.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Cork and Fizz Guide to Wine podcast. If you are taking a trip to Burgundy or Virginia, or just live in the Virginia area, be sure that Maison Shaps and Virginia Wineworks are on your must-visit list. If I was going back to France, I'd also 100% book a cheese and wine pairing experience with Hanna, so be sure to do that as well. I'll have all the links in the show notes to check them out. If you love this episode as much as I did, I would sure appreciate it if you could take a quick second, just rate it, leave a review on whatever app that you're listening to this on. And if you know another wine lover in your life that would enjoy this, please share it with them. You can send a direct link, or you could just take a screenshot and share it on your social media. It would mean the world to me. In next week's episode, we'll hear part 2 of my conversation with Hanna and Michael. We'll dive deeper into the world of Burgundy wine, and they'll share a great tip for how to explore Burgundy wine without feeling overwhelmed. Thanks again for listening, and if you want to learn more about wine, come follow me at Cork and Fizz on Instagram. And if you're interested in exploring new wines and joining an incredible community of wine lovers, be sure to sign up for my virtual tasting club, The Cork Crew. You can head to corkandfizz.com/free class pass to come check out one of our tastings for free. Cheers!